Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. I am surprised that Poland allows this kind of demonstrations to occur in this circumstance, which is the war in Ukraine. And these are some demonstrations, pro-Russian demonstrations, in front of the Ukrainian embassy in Warsaw. These guys that protested, the demonstrators, were very sneaky because they incorporated in their demonstration not only, an opposition to the support for Ukraine of Poland and the Western countries, but also they incorporated over there what the Poles are calling it a genocide, the Ukrainians are calling a massacre of Polish people during the Second World War by some Ukrainian groups and so on. And Mr. Bandera being also involved in that in some capacity. I will read that in the article coming from Ukraińska Prawda. So let's see what's going on. I'm surprised that they allowed it. Probably by incorporating that, they allowed, the demonstrations and the protest in front of the embassy, because it was about Volnia. Is that how we call it? Volhynia? I think that's how we call it. So let's go and see what's going on here. Ukraińska Pravda, today, July 9th, 2023. I think it was 80 years since the genocide or the massacre of the Poles. That's why you hear about it now more and more. Pro-Russian demonstrations in Warsaw demand an end to support of Ukraine. July 9th, 2023. Pro-Russian forces have staged a protest, pro-Russian forces, outside the Ukrainian embassy in Warsaw, reacting aggressively to activists who turned up with Ukrainian flags. I'm pretty sure these guys were, the activists were peaceful and the other ones were savages, right? Probably, and I'm not going to care about that at this point. That's their business over there. Let the police sort them out. Details. Several hundred supporters of various pro-Russian organizations came to the demonstration outside the Ukrainian embassy, holding placards that read, Volhynia, we remember, or Volhynia. I will just use it, Volhynia. We remember, this is not our war, Russia is not our enemy, Ukraine is not fighting for Poland's freedom, and I'm continuing to quote, no to European Union and NATO membership for Ukraine, end quote. So they said they remember the genocide or the massacre. They say, and I'm quoting, this is not our war. I'm quoting again, Russia is not our enemy, end quote. I'm quoting again, Ukraine is not fighting for Poland's freedom, end quote. And I'm quoting again, now, no to European Union and the NATO membership for Ukraine, end quote. Now, the Volyn, I will say Volyn, it's easier right here. The Volyn massacre, the Ukrainians are telling us. They call it a massacre. The Poles are calling it a genocide. But that's the big problem between Poland and Ukraine right now. But since they have this president, I'm talking about the Ukrainian nations having that president, he might probably do whatever the Poles are telling him to do, for obvious reasons. I can't say it on YouTube. Let's move on. So, the Volyn massacre is a series of events that led to ethnic cleansing of the Polish and Ukrainian populations, involving the Ukrainian insurgent army, subordinate to the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists under Stepan Bandera, and the Polish Krajowa Army, with the participation of Polish Schutzmannschaft. I know what Schutzmannschaft, I know exactly what it is, battalions, auxiliary police of collaborators, presumably Soviet partisans, as well as Ukrainian and Polish civilians in 1943 during World War II in Volyn. It was a part of a long-standing rivalry between Ukrainians and Poles. That's a nice word over there. I would call it hatred, but hey, they call it rivalry is nice. Between Ukrainians and Poles in what is now Ukraine's west. Yes, Lviv or Lvov. Poland considers the Volyn tragedy a genocide of Poles. You see, I don't know, and I don't pretend to know about this more than a few more words on top of this. But I think that Ukrainians in this long paragraph tried to put the blame on both, because they put here Polish and Ukrainian populations, ethnic cleansing of them, so they did it to each other, which I don't know. I don't want to get into that. I don't know if that's the case, and that's between the Poles and the Ukrainians. So they know better what happened over there than I. So let's move here to the last paragraph. The protesters demanded that Poland cease all cooperation with and support of Ukraine, and I'm quoting, until banderism in Ukraine is condemned, end quote, and say Poland should normalize relations with Russia and Belarus. The problem is, the problem for a lot of people, the Ukrainians built some statues to Stepan Bandera. It's not Antonio Banderas, which every time when I say Stepan Bandera, I have to stop right there instead of Antonio Banderas, the Spanish actor. That was called out by the Russians, condemned by the Russians, and not only by the Russians. How come this guy, Stepan Bandera, who is revered by some as a nationalist and tralala, by others is seen as this and that, collaborator with the Germans and so on. Now, again, that's not my trouble, not my problem. They should figure it out. The problem is, there is some truth that Bandera and his organization, a lot of Poles, that's a fact. Now, I don't know if the Poles retaliate or not. That's between them over there. I know that the Soviets in the Katyn forest, how should I put it mildly, then the MKDV, I think that's how it's called, and then it was KGB, the commissars committed about between 15 and 30,000, or it was just 15, not just, it was 15,000 Polish officers and intelligentsia killed, massacred in the Katyn forest. And then when the Germans pushed back their invasion in Barbarossa against the Soviet Union, the communists, to destroy them, they discovered that the Poles told them, hey, look what happened over there, and then uncovered the whole Katyn forest massacre. They invited foreign, how do you call them, Red Cross and other organizations, took pictures, and then they said it was the Soviets right here. They did it. And if you remember, that was put on the German army Wehrmacht until 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed. Russia opened the archives, and it was the NKVD commissars did it, and then say, oh, okay. So that's how history works. You put everything on the shoulders of some criminals, even if they didn't commit that certain crime. But you put it over there because you are friends with this guy, and these guys committed the crime, which was the Soviets, the communists. And then the Americans and the Brits were friends. Remember Nuremberg trials? They were together, or they were trying the criminals of war, the Nazi criminals of war, together as brothers. And then they carved Europe with spheres of influence, and they took over. They divided the world among them, like the other guy wanted, but only everything for himself. I'm not going to go into that. And then obviously they said, yeah, Katyn forest, the Germans did it. And then in 1991, no, actually we did it. No, Soviet Union did it, the commissars, the communists, because it was not the Russians. And you still can find the name of the guy who did it. I can't remember right now the name. It's a very familiar name, who did it. And I read about it, how they did it, and what was the procedure and all that. That was a big, big crime. Anyway, here it is. There are some people over there protesting, but because they have Bandera in that, Antonio Banderas in it, the Polish government is like, all right, seems to me. Freedom of speech. Good, great. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.